just an introduction for our speakers. Cynthia Minh works as the Director for Disability Alliance of BC, Tax AID and Access RDSP programs. Alongside partner organizations, these programs have supported thousands of people with disabilities across BC with income tax filing and related benefits, including disability tax credit, registered disability saving plans. She holds an MA in English literature and a specific interest in Asian diasporic literature. She sits on the board of directors for Plan Institute and is a community member of the Emily Carr's Research Ethics Board. Welcome, Cynthia. Now over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be here with all of you. Today, we're going to talk about understanding the disability tax credit, and we'll get into the disability tax credit and the registered disability savings plan. So I'm from Disability Alliance BC. A little bit more about us. We've been around since 1977, and we champion disability issues through several ways, through systemic advocacy, educational resources, through research, publications, and through our direct services support. Some of the programs that I won't be talking about today, but are maybe helpful to some of you. We do help with provincial and federal disability assistance programs, the PWD and CPPD programs, through our Advocacy Access program. We also help with income tax filing through our Tax AID program. We also have a disability law clinic that helps with people who are facing discrimination because of their disability. We also have a Right Fit program that matches full-time wheelchair users with wheelchair accessible housing. And we have a number of auxiliary programs and projects to help promote more accessibility in the province. The programs that I'll be discussing today is the Access RDSP program that helps with the disability tax credit and registered disability savings plan. Before I begin, I just want to give a land acknowledgement. DABC operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I've been thinking a lot lately about indigeneity, land sovereignty, and a lot about what that means in the present day, as we see globally in areas like Palestine and Congo, Indigenous rights being once again at the forefront of some of the largest conflicts. And I think it's important that we think about these in conjunction with our position as settlers here in Canada. We honor the territories, the land stewards, Indigenous people who inhabit and have taken care of this land for time immemorial and continuing on. Today, we're going to discuss both the disability tax credit and registered disability savings plan. We will be discussing on the disability tax credit side, what is the DTC, how to qualify for the DTC, how to start the process, and helpful tips for qualifying. On the registered disability savings plan side, we're going to talk about what the RDSP is, how to qualify for the RDSP benefits, and how to start saving with an Endowment 150 grant that's available. What is the DTC? The DTC was designed as a non-refundable tax credit and is intended to help cover the extra medical costs that Canadians with severe or prolonged physical impairments pay. The credit helps people with disabilities or their support persons reduce the amount of income tax that they may have to pay. In 2018, it was found that only 40% of Canadian adults that do qualify for the DTC get it, and that's because of significant barriers to access. Barriers like overwhelming application processes. It is healthcare barriers that exist in the healthcare system and financial barriers to applying. But why should someone get the DTC? Well, as you mentioned, it's a non-refundable tax credit that helps reduce taxes owing. And the way it works is that a successful applicant would be able to claim a portion of the maximum disability amount In 2023, that's going to be 8,986. Those with children with disabilities are able to claim an additional supplement amount too. And depending on the personal income tax that you pay, you will get a portion of that amount in a return. It might reduce the taxes if you're owing money, or you might get it as part of a refund if you are paying taxes throughout the year. Some things to keep in mind if you don't owe any taxes or you're not paying any income tax. Well, you can claim the credit for up to 10 years before you apply. So if you've been living with your disability for a long time and you've been working during that time, you have been paying income tax, then you can claim up to 10 years before you apply. The second thing to keep in mind is that any unused credit amounts can be transferred to a caregiver who helps you financially with food, shelter, and clothing so that their taxes can be reduced. So how it works is it would be applied to your taxes first, and any unused amounts could be transferred to a supporting family member. The way that you could do that is to answer question 3 on the form that we'll talk about later. Parents and legal guardians and legal representatives of applicants can choose to get their taxes reassessed automatically, but other family members will need to request a readjustment of their taxes by letter or by using a T1 adjustment form to catch any taxes that you are retroactively owed. But the biggest reason to get the disability tax credit, even if you don't owe any income taxes, is that the DTC is a gateway to other tax-related supports and federal financial programs. So some of these include the Canada Workers Benefit Disability Supplement. So for people who are low income workers who do already receive the Canada Workers Benefit, if you're a recipient of the DTC, you can get a disability supplement on top of that. That's that refundable tax credit. For anybody who has a child with a disability, if they are already receiving the Canada Child Benefit, that's that monthly payment from the federal government, you can receive a disability supplement called the Child Disability Payment, which gives you a couple $100 extra every month as additional payment. Certain medical expenses, including some therapies, can only be claimed with the disability tax credit. Those with the disability tax credit can also claim what's called a disability support deduction, which helps people deduct expenses that they are needing to have to go to school or to work. Caregiver credit is another one for people who are caring for somebody with a disability. If you do care for somebody and they have the DTC, no additional information, medical certification is required in order for you to claim that credit. And this is a non-refundable tax credit. So just like the DTC helps reduce the taxes that you already owe. Homeowners can also benefit. So in Canada, any first-time home buyer, you can claim what's called the home buyer's amount on your taxes just to reduce the taxes even further. For people who are eligible for the DTC, you don't have to do that just for your first home. It's for every home that you purchase. The home accessibility tax credit is for any expenses that you have to deduct because of renovations you make to your home to make it more accessible. And there are sort of, eligibility for qualified disability trust status or preferred beneficiary election option. These 2 points here have to do with reducing the taxes that you have to owe if you have something called a trust. And sometimes when that happens and there are withdrawals made or when money is coming back to you, you have to pay taxes on the withdrawals. And these 2 instances can reduce the amount of taxes that someone has to pay. There are certain education-related benefits, as well as the Registered Disability Savings Plan, which is that financial program that we were talking about. This is a really important plan because it helps boost long-term financial security, and I'll be talking a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. So all in all, the DTC is the primary way the federal government recognizes disability in a lot of ways. And we saw that being enacted because during the release of the COVID-19 pandemic-related emergency benefits, the DTC was used as a gateway support for the $600 emergency relief benefit that was given to people with disabilities. And so that's a reason why you want to get it as well. There might be some supports on the horizon that's going to be given by the federal government, and chances are the DTC could play an important role. So something that's upcoming is the Canada Disability Benefit, and this is not in legislation yet, and there's still so many conversations about how it's going to work. But the Canada Disability Benefit is an upcoming benefit that will provide guaranteed income supplements for people with disability to raise the poverty level, to raise everybody up above the poverty level. And the DTC might play an important role in that. So it's important to keep your eye out to think about reasons why you might want to apply. How to qualify for the DTC. So the DTC has no age restriction. Unlike other disability benefits out there, you can apply from birth to whatever age. It also does not have to do with whether someone can go to work or go to school. And it doesn't depend on income or assets. So someone can have low to no income or high income and asset levels and still be able to get something like the disability tax credit. What it does have to do with is that applicants have to have a severe and prolonged impairment. And impairment can be mental or physical. Well, what does that mean? Prolonged means that the impairment has lasted or is expected to last at least 1 year. What does severe mean? A severe means the applicant has 3 ways that they can qualify. The first is through market restriction. That means you're very restricted in one basic activity of daily living. You can't do the activity, you need a lot of help to do the activity, or you take a lot longer to do the activity than most people. The second way you might qualify is maybe you're restricted a little bit less, but in 2 or more of the activities. And the cumulative effect is equal to a market restriction. The third way you might qualify is if you're in need of life-sustaining therapy, and that's the therapy that supports a vital function. And it also has to take up a lot of time. You have to have that therapy at least 2 days a week, and that therapy must take at least 14 hours in a week in order to qualify. So we talked about the first 2 ways relying on restrictions that you have in basic daily activities. What are those activities? You can be restricted in vision, speaking, eating or making food, hearing, walking, eliminating, which is using the toilet, dressing, or mental functions necessary for everyday life. How to apply. So like many disability benefit forms, like the disability assistance forms or Canada Pension Plan disability forms, you're going to need a health practitioner to help you with the form. You're going to need medical certification. But unlike other forms, the DTC allows other health practitioners to also help with the form. Medical doctors and nurse practitioners can fill out all sections. They can certify all sections. And so this is a good idea if you are having physical and mental health restrictions. But let's say you're restricted in certain categories. Different health practitioners might be able to help. So physiotherapists can help with walking. Psychologists can help with mental functions necessary for everyday life. Speech language pathologists can help with speaking. There's no preferred medical professional. So we recommend going with someone who you trust and that knows your condition very well. Sometimes what we find is that people might have healthcare barriers and have difficulty talking to certain medical practitioners about their restrictions. Well, if you're talking to several different medical practitioners and they only know a fraction of your restrictions, what you can do is submit different applications, one from a physiotherapist, for example, one from an occupational therapist, and you can kind of combine these 2 or one from a psychologist and one from an occupational therapist. However, you have to be wary that these two applications that you send in do not have inconsistent information. If so, that might lead to a denial. So what we recommend instead, if possible, is for your health practitioners to actually have conversations with one another. And if there's a way that health practitioners can allay some information to make sure that your primary medical practitioner has everything they need to fill out the form, then that's the way we would prefer to do that. But there's different options available for people who face barriers with that. There are different ways to apply right now, which is really, I think, an important thing to know when you're thinking about this application. Well, first, how do you apply? Well, there's a paper form and a digital form. And the form is called T2201, the Disability Tax Credit Certificate. If you're using the paper form, you're going to fill out the first section, Part A of the form, and you can take the form to a medical practitioner to finish Part B of the form. You can send in the completed form by mail or online. The digital, if you're filling out the application online, though, there are several ways to do so. So the way that I'm talking about is that CRA now has a digital tool that's available for medical practitioners so that they can fill out Part B online. The way that that works is a little bit different. So you're going to fill out the first section, Part A of the form, online through your My Account or by calling the CRA. And once you finish that, you're going to get a reference number. You can talk to the medical practitioner to finish Part B of the form online and give them the reference number if you do have it. You can then send in a completed form to the CRA by mail or online. But if you have already given your reference number to your medical practitioner, practitioners can now send your application in for you immediately after completing their section of the form. Now, while that is a wonderful thing, if you do want to check over your application just to make sure that all your restrictions have been clearly laid out, they reflect the restrictions that you feel on a daily basis, you might want to talk to your medical practitioner to see if you can check over the application before they submit it. If you want to use the online form and you don't have a reference number, that's okay too. What happens is the medical practitioner can fill out their section online. It generates a PDF they can print for you, and then you can submit the form to the CRA by mail or online. And sometimes not preferred because then you get to check over what's been submitted. So the form has each section, and each section of the form will go through vision, speaking, hearing, and all the different categories that we discussed earlier. Each of these categories will ask some common questions like, do you take any medication? Do you use any devices in therapy or therapy? And it will also ask your practitioner to sort of rate the severity of your restrictions from a scale from mild to severe, and also talk about how frequently you experience symptoms from a scale of rarely to always. And so what if you have multiple restrictions? Well, the CRA will determine whether or not someone qualifies under cumulative effective significant restrictions automatically if their medical practitioner fills it out online. So there's no need to talk about that. If your doctor is filling it out online, they will be prompted to talk about whether or not you qualify under cumulative effects of significant restrictions. So this is sort of like the basis of what goes into each section. And I'm going to go through a little bit of some examples so you get more of an idea about what I'm talking about later on. Some things to keep in mind. Eligibility is not based on diagnosis. It's actually based on how someone is restricted in daily living activities. So it's important that you provide specific examples about your restrictions to your medical doctor, because it is not just enough just to say you're diagnosed with this and here's the credit. You need to be talking about these activities and what you're still facing. But remember, it's the CRA that determines eligibility, so it doesn't hurt to apply. A lot of times, we might think that restrictions may not be severe enough to apply, but my advice is for everybody to just try, be honest about restrictions, put that into the form, and it's up to the CRA to make the final determination. So here's some helpful tips. Prepare examples of restrictions from your daily life. And advocates at DABC can assist. We provide free one-on-one support. We interview our clients, go through restrictions with them, help them prepare sample materials that they can take to their medical practitioner. And we also have developed an online tool to help with this as well. So the online tool is at www.disabilityalliancebc.org/DTC-APP. And the applicant can answer questions. It will create papers that they can take to their medical appointment. So that will help you with your doctor when explaining some of the restrictions that you face in daily life. Some key phrases. When you're providing examples to your medical practitioner, you want to use phrases like substantially all the time. You want to say that you want to keep in mind some of the restrictions that you have substantially all the time. If you're facing some episodic symptoms, but they can come at any time, and when you do experience them, they are pretty marked, that still qualifies as something that can come at any time and means that you're still restricted substantially all the time. Keep a note when you require assistance, when you feel like you're unable to manage an activity. Compare yourself to someone your age without restrictions. Do you take 2 times as long to complete an activity? 3 times? If you do take 2 times, maybe you have significant restrictions and you're looking at that cumulative effect to make sure you qualify. If you take 3 times longer, then you might qualify with just one category. If you have children who have disabilities, think about how they're expected to reach milestones of same-age peers. Maybe they're not expected to reach milestones, and that's an indicator of whether or not they'd be approved with the application. Things that are not relevant to the form: the ability to work, housekeep, manage a bank account, drive, doing recreational activities. Try not to put these in the form at all. These don't matter to the CRA. And sometimes when we see that people put these things in their applications, it creates confusion and lead to a denial or more additional information. Okay, let's go through some specific examples that I think might be relevant to folks here today. Let's say someone has walking restrictions. Well, like we said, this category would start with some generic questions that are there in a lot of the different categories. This one has a specific one that asks if someone is required to be in a bed all the time or be in a wheelchair all the time. Then you're asked if you take medication. You're asked if you use any devices, and that can include canes, braces, walkers, wheelchairs. You might be asked, what therapy you might require. So that's physiotherapy, occupational therapy, massage therapy, chiropractic therapy, or any other therapy that you're using to help with these specific restrictions. And then if you need assistance from others. Specific factors might also include fatigue, impaired balance, impaired coordination, impaired or abnormal gait, so the way that you walk, limited range of motion, muscle weakness, pain in specific body parts like ankle, foot or toes, hip, back, knee, or leg, or shortness of breath. And in each of these factors, you want to think about how severe are the symptoms. Again, thinking about that scale, mild to severe. And how often to each occur. That scale again, rarely to always. And then for each section, there's a part where your medical practitioner can provide specific examples. And so this is the language that you want to give your practitioner. So the patient walks significantly slower than someone their age without restrictions. They take shorter steps. They have limited range in motion and impaired coordination. So that might be difficulties turning. You might experience involuntary movements, fascination, retropulsion, freezing of gait at any moment. And you might have difficulty balancing or are at risk of falling. So these are some examples that you might be experiencing and that would be relevant to the form. Let's take a look at feeding. Again, some generic questions to start. So for this one, it is a feeding tube required? Medication, devices, and this time devices include adaptive dinnerware, utensils, ready-made meals, therapy, so the same kinds of therapy, and assistance from others. Other factors that are specific to the category would be dyskinesia, so tremors, fatigue, impaired coordination, impaired dexterity, limited range of motion, muscle weakness, pain in your arm, hands, or shoulders. So again, thinking about how severe symptoms are and how often these occur. There's a section to add more information, and again, here's what you might say. For eating, it might take significantly longer to eat a meal than someone your age without the same restrictions because of difficulties biting, chewing, and swallowing. You might experience occasional tremors and involuntary movements and have difficulty holding cutlery. For preparing meals, you might take significantly longer to prepare meals because of tremors, limited range of motion, impaired coordination, and things that might be more difficult would be lifting heavy items, reaching ingredients, chopping vegetables. Maybe you need to sit down to perform tasks. Maybe you have to plan your day so that you're doing tasks when you have higher functionality, and you need to rest when that's not happening. So managing your schedule, taking frequent breaks, those are things that are indicators of you qualifying. And now I'm just going to briefly touch on mental functions, which is a complicated category, but it used to be that this category only had 3 subsections, but now the CRA has opened it up to include a lot more other subsections. These categories include attention, concentration, memory, judgment, perception of reality, problem solving, goal setting, regulation of behavior and emotions, verbal and nonverbal comprehension, and adaptive functioning. And so, much like the rest of the categories, the form asks specific questions that I'll show you in one slide, but they're asking you now for a different scale. In the factors that they provide, do you have no limitations, some limitations, or very limited capacity? So an example would be in goal setting, making and carrying out simple day-to-day plans. No limitations, some limitations, or very limited capacity. And then self-directing debate, again, everyday tasks, again, that no limitations, some limitations, and very limited capacity. So having to think about a new scale, but still thinking about where you might fall on that. Remember that episodic symptoms, if you do experience them, will still qualify if they are persistent and they come at any time. And when they come, they are marked restrictions. So think about that and think about how often they come and how long these symptoms might last. This is information that would be important to the CRA. Something also to keep in mind is that if you have very limited capacity in any of the subcategories listed here, you do qualify as a marked restriction. So if you have very limited capacity in concentration, and only concentration, you would still qualify. Some of the earlier questions include, again, medication, devices, therapy, or aids, and these aids might include GPS devices, safety devices, memory aids. Can you live independently? Yes or no? And when they talk about living independently, what they really mean is what kinds of support do you need in order to live and to live your daily life, to have daily functionality. And that might mean, community-based health services. It might mean support from family members. And then, so if you have children under 18, thinking about if someone needs adult supervision at home beyond an age-appropriate level, those are things to keep in mind. And then you have under each subcategory that space again where you can provide specific examples. And so what you want to tell your medical practitioner are things like this: concentration. You have difficulty focusing on a subject for any length of time, easily distracted, and will leave simple tasks unfinished. You might have impairments in memory, so you take longer to complete tasks and retrieve information from memory. You might require visual and verbal reminders to manage your daily schedule. Verbal comprehension, you might have difficulty processing verbal information due to cognitive difficulties. So those are some things that might be relevant. And finally, life-sustaining therapy. We talked about needing therapy to support a vital function at least 2 times a week at an average of 14 hours a week. And some examples might include insulin therapy for diabetes or kidney dialysis. And the trick here is that some activities related to therapy can include it in the time log, that 14 hours a week, but some can't. So it's very good to be careful here. Okay, so that's eligibility. Now let's talk about submitting the application. How do you do that? Well, you can mail the form in either physically to the Winnipeg Tax Center through snail mail. In BC, you're going to mail it to the Winnipeg Tax Center. In other places, you're going to mail it to the closest tax center. And then you can submit it online using the CRA My Account. Remember too that if your doctor already has your reference number, they can actually help you submit on your behalf as well. After your application has been submitted, now what? Well, it may take 3 to 4 months for the CRA to make that decision. And what they do tell you is they'll inform you via letter, a notice of determination letter. So you can maybe access this letter online through your My Account, or it'll be mailed to you. And 3 to 4 months is a pretty long estimation. Usually it takes around 8 weeks for them to process something like this. But sometimes it can take longer if wait times are a little bit longer. You can check the status of your application. So it can be checked online through your My Account, or you can call the CRA at that number to check the status of the application. After the application is submitted, there are 3 things that can happen. The CRA might have more questions, and they're going to send an additional questionnaire to your medical practitioner, so you won't even know that this is happening. What we recommend is if you haven't heard back about your DTC and it's been over a month and it's closer to 2 months, talk to your medical practitioner. See if they received an additional questionnaire. This happens if the CRA has more questions about the application. Or you could be approved, and you can be approved indefinitely. So that means you don't have to reapply unless the CRA asks you to. Or more commonly, you can be approved for a number of years. So that might be 5 years, so 2022 to 2027, or this year, 2023 to 2028. And that means you do have to think about that end date, and you will have to reapply. The third thing is that you might be denied. But what we like to drive home is that it's not the end of the road. There are options. So you can either reapply at any point, or you can go through some denial options, which is to add information or to submit a formal appeal, either to the Chief of Appeals or to the tax court. So we usually recommend that people add more information to their application, because we find that 90% of denials happen because the application was not filled out with as much information as the CRA would hope. So sometimes just getting your doctor to write another letter to the CRA would help with the denial. You only want to think about submitting a formal objection to the Chief of Appeals or tax court if, let's say, your application was perfect, it should have been approved as is, and for some reason it was not approved. And this time you're going to be submitting a letter from your own voice, talking about how the application should have met the requirements set out by the CRA and by the Income Tax Act. And so those are the options there. Remember to keep copies of the application, and don't feel free to talk to DTC about getting support. I'm going to briefly go over the RDSP. So clients with the DTC can open an RDSP, Registered Disability Savings Plan. And this is one of the primary reasons why you want to start and get the DTC. Well, what is it? The RDSP was created by the federal government to be a long-term savings plan for people with disabilities and their families. It can help people even if they can't put any money into the plan. It won't affect other disability benefits. And you can have up to $200,000 in personal contributions and could receive up to $90,000 in government contributions, plus any investment income that's earned. Like an RDSP, like an RRSP, it is for your future years. But because the government puts a lot of money into it, $90,000, it's a really important savings investment for people with disabilities. Who qualifies? Well, to be eligible, you have to be a Canadian resident, and that doesn't mean you have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. It just means that you have to have residential ties to Canada. And you have to have a social insurance number, and you have to be approved for the DTC. There are some age criteria that's tied to this, not to the DTC, but to the RDSP. So you have to open the RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 59. And to qualify for any grants and bonds, that free money from the government, you have to open the RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 49 in order to qualify for the grants and bonds. Now, why would someone want to open the RDSP if they are above 49? They can't get any grants and bonds, but they still would like to qualify. Well, if you think back here, the RDSP does not affect other disability benefits. So if you have assets that exceed the allowable amount for disability assistance, that's $100,000 in BC, you want to think about where to put your money so that it doesn't affect the disability assistance payments. And the RDSP is one such vehicle where you can put money into the RDSP and it's not going to affect your disability payment. But more importantly, for those that are 49 in this calendar year or under, the government puts a lot of money into the RDSP to help savings grow for someone's future. How does it work? Let's talk about the grant amounts first. So for every contribution that someone puts in, the government is going to put in some money up to a maximum amount every year. The way that it works is the first 500 that's being put in, the government is going to match that 1 to 3. So going to put in 1,500. The next 1,000 that's put into the plan, the government is going to match that next 1,000, 1 to 2, and put in 2,000. So sometimes we say the magic number is if you're able to contribute 1,500 a year, the government is going to put in 3,500 every year. And that's for everybody whose family income is $106,000 or less. If your income is less than $106,000, then you might get partial grants, but not the full thing. And there's a maximum lifetime grant limit, which is $70,000. How do the bonds work? Well, someone with an RDSP can get the bonds if their family income is less or equal to $34,000, around $35,000. And they happen automatically. So the maximum someone can receive is $1,000 every year until December 31st of that they turn 49 years old. And if someone's family income is between 35,000, maybe 53,000, they can still get partial bonds. They don't get the full 1,000, but they get a little bit less. No personal contribution is required for this one, so it is just income-based. And the maximum lifetime bond limit is $20,000. That's how that $90,000 is broken up. So that means that people can get grants and bonds if they open an account. You don't have to make any contributions, so you don't have to be earning a lot and putting money into it in order to get bonds. And so it's a really important thing to think about. You can get retroactive grants and bonds as well. So just like the DTC, you can get grants and bonds for up to 10 years before you apply and open your RDSP, as long as you also have the DTC during those years. And bonds are received automatically. And the way that you want to maximize your grant amounts is by talking to your financial advisor about how you can put in the right amount of money so you get the most amount of grants. We have an online calculator that our partners at Plan Institute developed at our RDSP.com website, Plan Institute's RDSP.com website, at www.rdsp.com/calculator. Plan Institute also administers an $150 grant available. That's available for everybody under 18 or anybody who earns under $34,000 a year and have received income assistance since 2008. So more information at www.rdsp.com/endowment-150. And it's just an extra $150 to help with your investments. Here are more helpful tools on the DTC and RDSP. There's one that we developed for newcomers with disabilities specifically. And we also developed help to consult on a disability benefits compass that Prosper Canada developed that goes into what we call the 4 main disability benefits: PWD, CPPD, DTC, and RDSP. And yeah, if you need any support at all, we are here to help. You can call us at our number listed there. You can email us at rdsp@disabilityalliancebc.org. You can always visit our website.